Great, awesome. So I'll start with a brief intro. So hi, everyone. Welcome to our ACL year-round mentorship. So we're an effort started in 2021, mainly for the NLP natural language processing community. And we have a monthly panel inviting around three people. And then we'll talk about a certain topic and open all the questions to students who are interested in it. So for this upcoming hour, we will talk about ethics, NLP, LMs related things. And I will first get every panelist a chance to introduce themselves before we open to the questions. Maybe we can start with Malihe and then Vinod and then Wana, finally me.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Malihe Alikhani. I'm an assistant professor of AI and social justice at Northeastern University. I work on designing inclusive and equitable language technologies, and this involves looking into issues of bias and fairness in machine learning models, NLP models, also thinking about how we can design systems that are inclusive and accessible. So I've worked on several projects in the space of fairness and bias and sort of culturally grounded systems, as well as accessibility, including working with low vision, hard of hearing, and speech, different kinds of sort of supports for these communities. I have a small, medium-sized lab here at Northeastern with various students at various stages, and I look forward to this discussion. Oh, I forgot, and I help Vinod with the running the sort of ethics reviews for ARR.
So it means if people are confused about maybe your first time submitter to ACL rolling review and then wonder what that ethics section is asking for, you can very welcome to post your questions.
Yeah, that's us. Any questions you have? Here.
I can go next, Zhijing?
Yes, go ahead. We'll have like first transition.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Vinodkumar Prabhakaran. I am a staff research scientist here in Google Research. I identify as a computational social scientist. Before coming to Google, I predominantly worked on using AI-based techniques, technologies, NLP and machine learning to understand social disparities and intervene on various societal sort of processes and institutions and so on, like racial disparities in policing, for instance. But since joining Google over the last 5 years, I predominantly work on understanding how these social disparities and social injustices do get captured and propagated and sometimes even amplified through technology, AI in particular, NLP being my focus area there. One particular kind of theme that has emerged in my work over the last 4 or 5 years is cross-cultural considerations in how we engage in these really socially situated questions around ethics and fairness and bias, and all these questions are very socially situated, but we often engage with it from more technical and like a one-size-fit-all kind of like approach. So a lot of my current research looks into cross-cultural considerations, be it in terms of the data that we use and what cultures are represented and how they're represented, but also in terms of models and the decisions that the models make and how it can be culturally laden, how it can be more culturally aware. And also the values that we encode into, we as researchers and developers encode into our models and data processes, and how that's also coming from a place that we kind of don't really make explicit often. I see that there's a question already in like the Slido, so I'll reserve my detailed answer there, or I'll go deeper into it like when I answer that question. But yeah, a lot of my work is in the cross-cultural considerations in AI in general. Yeah, I've been with the NLP community for over, I think, 15 years now. And I do a lot of service activities, and one very fulfilling activity is this ethics co-chairing with Malihe, ethics review co-chairing, where we do ethics reviews, or we do coordinate ethics reviews for papers that may benefit from having the second opinion from a reviewer. We don't make decisions, so that's easy. We get the easier part of like getting the reviews done. We don't say yes or no. Anyway, I'll stop my intro here, but I look forward to answering everyone's questions.
I can go next. So hello everyone, I'm Juana Ignat. I'm a postdoc at the University of Michigan, and I work on multimodal, mostly multimodal applications, so language and vision. And during my PhD, I work mostly on human actions from social media videos. So understanding those actions like temporal localization, or identifying if the actions are present in the video. And then after that, I wanted to dive more into cross-cultural applications, like having models that not, because majority of models work mostly for Western countries, and we wanted to see how exactly we can evaluate these and how they perform across different demographics. So yeah, during my postdoc, I started working on that. So how models work across different income levels, and also finding ways to strategically annotate data so that we can improve these models also when data is insufficient, like for example, across different regions. Yeah, so I'm mostly focusing now on the cross-cultural aspect, and also working with data from different income levels. And I'm happy to be here and also learn more about the ethics. I'm really curious about this topic. I know it's very important.
Yeah, definitely. Same feeling for me. Hi everyone, I'm Zhijing. Me and Wana and Vinod are co-organizers of the ACL mentorship program. Also on the ethics topic, Radha, Wana, and I are part of the organization for the NLP for Positive Impact workshop. So we welcome all papers thinking about, oh, how can we either mitigate the problems of existing LMs or use them actively towards, let's say, maybe helping poverty, helping healthcare, education, and so on. Also in this mentorship session, I'm final year PhD at Max Planck Institute and ETH. I will probably be an incoming professor soon. In this session, I'm thinking about making the best use of the time for all the audience, like everything you care about. I think we can also have a mixture of like short-term questions in terms of like, if you are thinking about your next project, can we help you polish your ideas for your next project on NLP and ethics and so on? Like maybe you also want to explore how a PhD would be structured on this topic. Then career-related things we could also help. And then also like long-term things, if you're just curious, like, well, LLM cause a big problem for society, and then like any future-looking things, we can also discuss that as well. So really welcome any like high-level, low-level questions. Great, then I will leave it to our host, Vinod, and then like you can lead us through the questions.
Sure. So let me pull up the Slido. Is that sorted?
It's sorted by votes.
Okay. Let me. Okay, so we have the first question here. What are the ethical risks of current LLMs? I will apply to PhD this year, and I'm hesitating whether to work on ethics or general development of NLP models. So, I mean, I have so much to say about this, but I just realized that I'm a moderator and not the panelist. So
you should be. You should take
I'll speak in the end. Like, so I want you all to speak. So Malihe, do you want to go first?
You should, we should keep it
No,
informal.
please go ahead.
We would love to, yeah. Well, I mean, this is a very, very broad question. I mean, we've all heard about the sort of different biases that goes into these models, different ethical issues, right? So in terms of biases, thinking about gender bias maybe, or biases towards certain demographics is what we talk the most about, but lots and lots of other biases that we don't even know how to measure, how to study, and in interactions with these models, users are exposed, or experts who are using them will see the results of these different biases and ethical problems in the outcome that they might get out of these models. I mean, I don't want to, as a sort of, just broadly thinking about privacy as an issue that people have been talking a lot about. Are we sharing the data with these models with a company or another company that is not sort of aligned with the goals of the users, or it may get used in certain ways that the users or communities may not be happy. There are, of course, issues around transparency, around what goes into the models, how we are evaluating, how can we explain some things for users who are using these models. There are issues around environmental costs of these models, right? So, I mean, the list goes on and on forever. The question about choosing a PhD topic, I think, one thing I would encourage you, if you are interested in this topic, of course, getting in touch with an advisor, finding someone who you share interests with is very important, perhaps the most important thing. But if you're a master's student, or you still have a year to apply and this is just on your mind, one very good way for you to get in touch with the kinds of problems that people are working on and meeting people, and then deciding what sort of direction you are interested in would be to participate the workshops. We have this year at ACL community, we received it was record breaking number of workshop proposals. And many of them are around the topic of privacy and climate sort of issues, and safety and transparency, and bias, and LLMs for social good, and what goes into designing such models. So I highly encourage you to either attend, if you can, these workshops, or check the proceedings, or if you can virtually get in touch with these people if a topic interests you, to sort of learn more about what goes into these projects, how people start and come up with ideas, how people carry out the data collection, or if there's the model training and evaluation. And how does the community look like? What the goals are. Do you want to be part of that community? Is that something that really interests you? And you should think about it for at least 5 years, right? If it's a PhD. So this is, I think, where I would like to leave it now. But of course, if there are any follow-ups, we'd be happy to talk.
I really love the suggestions. Vinod, I think we're curious about your idea.
No. I mean, Malihe covered most of it. And I mean, I think the as Malihe said, like, there's so many questions here. There's questions about bias and disparities, and like how that gets amplified. There's questions about privacy, questions about policy decisions around this, questions about values that like these large language models like encode, and like how do we deal with the fact that there's a value pluralism. We live in a world where like there's so many different values. How do we deal with that in the current kind of paradigm where there's like foundation models that are like put out by a few set of entities, and then like that becomes like the foundation that other technologies is built on. Like, so there's so many such questions there. There's also like that how this then get rolled out, like automation biases, and like questions about how they impact like communities. There's a lot of positive impact, like Zhijing was saying earlier, about like how it can be used for like education and like, better access to so many of resources. But it's also going to impact how communities in general and many industries are going to be like completely changed as a result of like these technologies like being introduced into those ecosystems. So there's a lot of really exciting research there. So it is a rich avenue of research if you're choosing like a PhD topic, compared to like say when 10 15 years ago when I was choosing a research topic. It was about how do you do a better parser, right? Like, like a part of speech tagger. Like I had colleagues whose PhD thesis was about like building a parser or building a part of speech tagger, which were like very technical questions at that time, and maybe linguistics and computer science kind of questions. Whereas now these technologies are so much more real and have real impact. So the questions are a lot more important. It affects, like, if you're answering something that can have like an immediate impact on like society. But also it wouldn't be like a purely computer science kind of inquiry. Like, it's not just about like writing code. A lot of the questions in the ethics and LLM kind of space tend to be interdisciplinary, in my opinion. That, like, maybe you will have like a PhD that is a co-advised with like someone in the law department and CS department, or someone in the social sciences or sociology department and CS department. And that didn't exist when I started. Like, 15 years ago, NLP was a very kind of laboratory thing, whereas now it's out there in the world, which is an opportunity for you to actually do a more meaningful PhD in collaboration with other departments. So especially in the case of ethics and NLP kind of questions, if you're interested in that, explore that kind of options and those kind of opportunities. I'll stop. Zhijing, please go.
Okay, great. And then me and then Wana. So I really like what all of like Malihe and Vinod mentioned. And then like there are some emerging like keywords such as like finding the community, and then also like as Malihe mentioned, check out the workshops as exact steps. And I was also thinking about maybe either choice would work as long as your advisor, PhD advisor, cares about ethics. Like, you could also first maybe work on developing a better model of things. And then if your follow-up paper on that, on mitigating risks from your models, could be also be appreciating your peer group and appreciated by your local lab, then it's a good thing, no matter what originally the local lab works for, maybe, yeah, purely for development of things and so on. Yeah, another thing is that I feel like maybe having a little bit intuition on how the models are developed and what are the real technical gist of them will help you if you later want to position your career into safety, ethics related things as well. So maybe both things go side by side, and your care about ethics could make you innovate on new model structure as well. Yeah, so as long as you're in a group recognizing all your efforts, you're good.
Anna?
Sure. I feel like you already covered most of the answers. Yeah, I feel like either or working on ethics or general development is fine. It depends on your preference. You can also discover, like, the PhD is a long, it's like 5 years, 5 to 6 years. So it's a long journey. You can discover things on the way. Maybe you start with general development, and if you find a problem that also is related to ethics, you can work on that. So I don't think there's just one clear path. You can be flexible with this. Also, depending on your advisor or other collaborators you find along the way. And as an example, I worked on this project on income. So we wanted to check how a state-of-the-art model, a multimodal model, worked across various income groups. And we found a problem there. We found that this model was excluding images from households from low incomes. So we could continue that path and look more into this, and maybe start on an ethics trajectory. Yeah, so I'm saying just it can happen along the way to discover new problems and things that are of interest to you.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, we will move on to the next question because I'm seeing that there's so many questions there, and as a moderator, I should be more on top of like making sure that we get through most of them. So I'm gonna just like combine a couple of questions. So the next two questions on the Slido, one is about what if the pace of AI research increases further and leaving no time for policymakers and society to adjust to these changes. And along with that, there is another question, which is like, I think it's like in a similar vein about ethics have many components such as justice, utilitarianism, virtue, etc. How should we care about these like theoretical aspects of like ethics? We as in like an NLP community, but also the policymakers and society to adjust with it. So, yeah, how can we leverage philosophical theories to build ethical NLP? So anyone wants to go about the policy and philosophical aspects of ethics in NLP or LLMs?
I mean,
Malihe.
I don't think I would. I can predict the answer. I think we're in this already, struggling with sort of what is happening. The efforts I've seen recently, if you are interested, you can check out the NIST website. There are sort of going around the country and holding workshops in collaboration with academia and industry. We were in one 2 weeks ago in Boston around harms of AI, transparency in AI, what goes into the development of AI. And so it received a lot of interest from academics and folks from industry. And if you look at the website, sort of your first reaction would be, this is nothing. What does this mean? But it's an evolving sort of effort, right? As we are in it, and we're all moving together in this, navigating it. As students and academics, I would say from sort of where I am and my position, the things that we can care about would be thinking about the goals of the technology we design. Is it rooted in the needs of the communities, the needs of the users? Are we rushing after certain benchmarks, or are we really taking the time and interviewing and community members and reaching out and thinking sort of more holistically about how it can be used, as opposed to, just changing the benchmarks or worrying about numbers? And that definitely is gonna slow you down and slow your research down, because it's not as easy as working with a benchmark that already exists. But that is a huge step that we can take as students, researchers, to make sure what we put out there is in a response to a need that is in the space of healthcare, that is embedded in the needs of communities, and that we're looking into designing systems for diverse communities, right? I mean, one way, we don't necessarily need to go engage with philosophical theories, although I did. That was my minor in PhD. We don't need to always start from axioms. Sometimes we need to look around and see, who are we leaving behind by deploying LLMs in schools and high schools and and college. I mean, several courses at Northeastern, for example, I know students benefit from interacting with large language models for programming and other purposes for writing. And so thinking about, does this happen at certain areas around New York and other parts, right? And if not, so what goes into it? How can we make it happen? Another point that, again, I think is something that we can do, and that has been in the guidelines that Vinod and I, along with all of our advisors for the ethics sort of board, we've been pushing for, is transparency and openness, right? Again, we're not trying to say yes or no, what is ethical, what is not, but rather just being open about what went into the process of coming up with that idea, of carrying it out and showing those results, right? So if policymakers are looking into it, they know what they're looking at. So if anyone wants to regulate it from a school principal or a school board to somewhere in Congress, they know what is in there. And oftentimes I have this challenge with the students because some of them think that all parts of the paper have to be interesting, like abstract and intro. It is actually these are actually those boring parts. These are all the parts where you have to go back into your analysis and really honestly report the distribution and really honestly sort of do the qualitative analysis and see what is coming out of it. And those are the screenshots and data points that you need to put in the appendix, because it's 8 pages, but we need to report sort of those things. And there are other ways for us, we don't necessarily have to go to Washington to get in touch with the sort of policy or what it means. Pretty much most of the schools around the US at least, and I'm pretty sure in Europe, maybe even better, like they have policy departments. There is political science departments, there's the law school, there are experts who can, as again, Vinod said, you can think about a joint PhD or putting someone on your committee or just seeking their advice about what goes into writing a paper in the space of AI and NLP, so it is readable and usable and understandable and transparent, right? So there are lots of opportunities for you as a student to reach out to people who are experts in this area. And there is lots of a space for it. We have moved from parsing and syntax and maybe some areas in semantics. But at the same time, if you look at the pool of our reviewers and tracks at ACL conferences, you see that they're a lot more interdisciplinary, that they're a lot more open to different kinds of research that might be more creative, that might be more that might be closer to these needs and concerns that you have. I think I'll stop here.
No, that was a really great answer, Malihe, and I agree with everything that you said. Like, I think we don't have to come up with like new things for LLMs. Many of these industries where like these technologies are being used, like they have thought about like fairness and ethics kind of questions like already, and there are existing mechanisms and existing like that may not be directly applicable in this like new technology, but like we have something to start with. We don't have to have like a language technology based like ethics or policy things. In the interest of time, I'll move on to the next question, and we can kind of share different people to answer questions. So so the next question is also very related to this.
Is it okay if I quickly butt in?
Yes, please. Yes,
so I was the one who asked the question regarding whether if the pace increases, what this would mean. So let's say we don't hit a wall. I didn't feel like this was answered. What like do we contribute to? Does any research we do that improves how easily or how robustly we can use large language models in the end just not increase this pace? And if it increases further, do you think that our policymaker society can handle this quick change, even if in the end the potential for good is enormous? And I think most of us agree that's why we're here. But do you think that how quickly and how we introduce this to society will mainly affect the outcome, or that if this is here now and industries just have this power, that with time, policy and society will adapt enough? Or is our society dynamic enough to handle any change?
So there's not very definitive answers, or at least like I don't think like I can have like definite answers. I'll give a short attempt, but like Zhijing or Oana or Malihe, please step in. So I mean I read that question and I had like some notes prepared, which is I think it is already happening, right? Like the pace of AI research and like development and like things are happening at a pace that we have not seen before in this field. It's already happening. And I personally, and as a researcher, I prefer slower science than this. Like, it doesn't really give us the time to sit and think about the problems, foundational problems here, as much as we would like. Not just out of individuals cannot do that, but rather the existing reward structures and institutional structures, be it in industry or in academia, are not favoring the slow science in this case, like at least like that in the current moment, largely. But there are still pockets of like research that happen like that ask these fundamental foundational questions like a lot more in depth, and that is still happening. I'm not saying that that is not at all happening, but overall I get your question, but my perception from like having as someone who has entered the space of ethics and NLP kind of space like 5 years ago, at that time I really felt like the policymakers like didn't really have a sense, a grasp of like what's happening, whereas that has changed a lot now. I think there's a lot more interdisciplinary work and research happening. It's not like enough, but I think as the research community have as the pace have increased, like the research community has also sort of picked up pace in some sense to respond to these things, and I hope that like that does catch up, and like we are able to sort of intervene more meaningfully and effectively. And I also think about other technologies in the past, like be it like engine, like whatever different kinds of engines, and like that how the automation changed, and like when that started, like it probably didn't have the policy framework, but like things since then, like various technologies have like sort of like worked within certain sort of policy guidelines and stuff. And yeah, I'm hopeful that like the policy sort of interventions can respond to the speed. Oana, Zhijing, or Malihe, do you want to respond? If I don't see anybody's face on my screen, so I'm going to move on. Did that answer your question, David? We can take it offline too.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So if you had any research for big improvements, you would have no reluctance to publish them because you think society and policymakers will deal with the effects of that.
I'm not personally saying that, like, that I will do that. Like, I think my comment was in general that the field has been much more prepared to deal with things now than like it was 5 years ago. But I think it in a case by case basis, like I think it depending on like sort of what we are engaging with, like I think it still would have to be reflected on before anyone rolls things out. And I mean, things like the ethics reviews that like Malihe and I coordinate, like are kind of like trying to look at that kind of questions. Like when there are papers that are kind of like, are getting into the territory or something of like, so that's the kind of shape where like such a reflective practice is like more beneficial, so that help the authors to sort of like deal with that, so to speak.
Thanks.
Sure. Cool. There was a question the next question I was going to say, and I'm going to stick with that, which is how can we prevent our research from primarily benefiting profit-driven corporations that disregard the long-term societal impact of products? And yeah, I think let's just like start with that. I am someone who works in a corporation, a profit-driven corporation that are building products using this technology. So maybe somebody else should speak to that. But I'll just like start with saying that it should not be in the hands of corporations to sort of like self-regulate and sort of like do things out of like magnanimity, but rather that it should be a community sort of affair, community engaged, and more distribution of power, and so all sorts of things. But I will let Zhijing or Oana. Oana, do you want to go? Or Zhijing, if you have thoughts.
I don't know. It's a very difficult question. I feel like so personally, I haven't thought about that. As a researcher, I'm mostly just focusing on research, and yeah, when I have to think about the ethics reviews, I think about that, but more like I don't get to think of how the corporations could use my research. And yeah, this is a good question. And I feel like we cannot do that alone, right? Like we have a certain bandwidth as a researcher, and I think collaborations, cross-disciplinary collaborations are really important in this aspect. So maybe related to the previous question, working with policymakers, or yeah, other people in this domain who know about the law and can give certain advice or impose certain rules. I think that would really benefit us as a community. So I'm looking forward to do that, to work cross disciplines with people from policy or from ethics. Zhijing, you have anything to add?
Zhijing?
Yeah, I really like Juana's answer. And then as PhD, sometimes you might feel that you have limited things you could do. Like maybe there is pressure of publishing something, but then like later where it will be used remains a question. And this is also important actually for people, more senior people, because we see younger people going also for internships. How should they form the right understanding of academia industry? Or maybe some people could also go to government and philanthropic organizations. Like what's the relation across all four types? I feel like it might be interesting that when people are still PhD, like you could have some like company aligned research, but you also could care about like what makes academia unique from industry. It's a lot about like the motivation, how of we doing things, incentives, and so on. Yeah, so I feel like things that care about minority groups more, like make use of like this motivation, which is very well appreciated here. Maybe also some like cross-disciplinary things, as we mentioned before, plus also maybe philosophical understanding of what we're doing. Yeah, but I have limited understanding. I leave it to Malihe as well.
Well, I guess
Malihe?
I think these are all lovely answers, but I would like to, I would say paraphrase the questions, right? Over the last 4 or 5 years, I've worked with small and big companies, and I think we've achieved amazing things, positive impact. I know lots of companies around New York who are focused on disparities in education, disparities in health, and this might be for profit, but the result is amazing. One of the collaborations we had with Amazon ended up in deploying a voice system that can better understand accents that has not sort of heard before. And I would say as an academic, if I was not empowered by the device, I would have never been able to reach out to these many people and these communities around Pennsylvania or other parts. I think, again, I would like to emphasize on what Oana said on the, and Zhijing said on thinking about the goals of your research, whatever it is that you're doing, and that we may go back again, David, to your question, right? If you are working on a model that is sort of addressing a need that is meaningful, whether it comes from a community or sort of, and then you don't need to sit on your model. The sooner you get that out, the more users you know in collaboration maybe with industry, you can sort of reach out to more users, the better. Right. And there are always people and there are always, and it's not just in industry, like these harmful research papers and projects have been in academia as well a lot before. I guess the more put all of your energy into asking the right questions, into interdisciplinary efforts into getting feedback from multiple people if you think the impact measurement, the harm measurement is risky, and worry less about, so don't allow that to stop you from doing the research or asking the right scientific questions or pushing for it. And this last semester I taught an AI ethics class, and this is one of the major worries that the students voice. You know, I want to do a PhD and I'm really interested in AI ethics, but I'm worried, what if I build something that is gonna, technology is gonna move on. It has always, right? Or and you should be part of it if you want to have a voice and if you want to shape it in particular ways that it sort of course, so it is aligned with your values. I guess, yeah, that's how I would paraphrase the question.
Thanks, Malihe. Yeah, I think Anna and Zhijing and Malihe covered most of it, and I don't really have a lot more to add here. And I'm also like representing a corporation, so I like I want to just also caveat that like I am representing the academic research community here. I'm not speaking on behalf of Google. Anything that I'm saying is not meant to defend Google or state Google's position. But yeah, I think on this particular thing, I'll just like say one thing is reiterate like one thing that Malihe mentioned about community engagement. I think sure, corporations have a big role to play in how these technologies shape a society. But I think it has to be done through community engagement. I co-lead a team called Technology, AI, Society, and Culture within Google, and we do a lot of foundational research on how to engage with communities in non-extractive, non-exploitative, and equity-oriented way. But we are like a small team, like of like 15 people. We do these research, but like I think it is no, it should not be. While corporations have a role to play here, corporations should not be the ones to lead here. I think it should be a community engaged, like civil society organizations and academic organizations coming together to actually answer some of these questions. I'll move on to one more question in the interest of time. Do you think that the current NLP community's definition of ethics favors certain cultures and worldview? I think we have many people here who would be able to respond to that. I will too, but I will hold my words until maybe I'll start with Oana, because I think Oana was mentioning earlier about like the cross-cultural work.
Sure. So I mentioned before so our research and also related work research found that these models favor mostly Western countries, Western values, in the sense that the state-of-the-art models work better on data from these countries, from these regions, and can exclude the other regions. And in the sense of ethics, so this is more related to fairness and bias. So how biased the models are in terms of their performance. I think this is also including in the ethics spectrum, but I'm not sure. Maybe I can let the experts, Vinod and Malihe, talk more about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I also get the feeling that the question is about asking about the definition of ethics. So it could be like there is a current status of how NLP is doing, and there's also like for the goal that we're optimizing for, are we also defining our goal in terms of Western values? I have less experience in this, but yeah, curious about any thoughts.
Malihe, do you want to take a stab, or I can go as well?
Sure. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I love this question. I think it's a fantastic question to be asking. Whoever asked this, thank you for that. As Oana and Zhijing said, there's like a lot of the cultural kind of biases baked into these models and the data and like how these models produce answers and so on. But there's also, I think this question, I'm interpreting it as like it's a more meta question. It goes beyond the model and data, but actually what do we even call ethics? that is defined from like a particular certain cultural worldview. And this is a real thing. And this is one thing that like motivated me to actually get into the cross-cultural kind of work 4 or 5 years ago. I always tell the story of like, I personally think that gender bias these models have is bad and they should be mitigated. But who gave me the right to actually go and do that, right? Like, where am I drawing those values from? Like, am I drawing it from because my mother said so, or because my religion said so? Like, where am I drawing these values from? Who gave me the right to sit in my San Francisco oat milk cappuccino drinking office and like decide what's best for the world, right? And that question has driven me for a lot of these research that I've been doing in the last few years. But it still is the case that a lot of times when people say safety, ethics, ethical, responsible, and all that, they're drawing it from like this sort of value systems that they are exposed to or they are situated within. And this requires like or intervening there requires like a very, very intentional reflective practice. We have like a couple of papers, but there was a paper I point you to like say a couple of papers. One was by Deirdre Mulligan and many other authors. I know that Deirdre Mulligan of Berkeley was an author. It's called This Thing Called Fairness. I think it was at FACT or maybe other conference. And they go into details of like what we mean by fairness, different disciplines like mean by fairness and what all it entails, and like kind of disentangle that like word. And this came up in 2018 when people were using the term fairness to mean so many things, whatever they want. There was another paper that I'll also point to is like I was part of, which was led by Nitya Sambashivan on reimagining algorithmic fairness for the Indian context. So that was like, even though we did and interviewing a lot of like experts in India, I think that paper, working on that paper with Nitya, changed substantially how I engage with these questions as well, because it was also bringing up questions that are around the ecosystem. It's not just about the cultural values, but also like the ecosystem within which these technologies are going to be deployed. The political ecosystem, how much political power do people have in questioning technologies like, deployed into the world? Those things vary across different cultural systems, and all of that matters in thinking about ethically or responsibly deploying technology systems. What might work within the US context, within the US political and technical and journalistic sort of ecosystem may not work in Indonesia or in India or Middle East or wherever other parts of the world. They may have very different constraints that will apply there. I'll stop here. Malihe.
Thank you. This is a really good summary. I think of you highlight all the a number of important works in this domain, and of course there's a lot more. And feel free to reach out if you want a reading list. I think when I heard the question, one part that we have not talked about, in my opinion, was about community, as an NLP community, right? And then I can tell you a little bit from being senior area chair, workshop review chair, or, roles like that we play, and how things have changed in the last year or two in terms of, so this year, if you think about it, we received a lot more workshop proposals where the focus was on different languages. It was on different cultures. It was on different needs in different countries, right? And I clearly remember us sort of discussing how can we make sure that there is room for Turkish, that there is room for Arabic, that there is room for this, and how do we plan it so with respect to locations, we can attract people to go to these workshops, and hopefully this will allow them to build those communities, right? So I've been working on Arabic and Farsi, and one of the main issues, and I mean sign language with the same problems we have, like when we submit papers, the data sets are smaller, right? The models can't be as sophisticated. The nature of experiments are different. And oftentimes reviewers are comparing this with a language such as English and German. And so if any of you are here or are watching this video recording of this, This is representation, right? When we don't try to only let people into our conferences where they have access to the largest data set in English, but we appreciate if they're working on literally text or cultural texts in different languages, and maybe the paper might be a little bit more descriptive, or the experiments are not as using sort of the most complicated modeling, right? So this is something that I would highly encourage you. You will be, if you are not already reviewing, soon you will be. When you see these papers, make sure you're referring them to the right area chairs. You're referring to them to the right tracks. That if you are interested in any of these problems, we are doing our best, at least the couple of years that I was part of this effort, to make sure at least there are workshops at each NLP conference that is sort of giving voice to one of these tracks where it may be hard for them to find people and similar researchers who are working on this in the main conference. And so, and if there are things that are missing, please step up. This is something you can change. This is something you can get in touch and sort of let us know. And I really like our community because I think it's an open scientific community. We receive a lot of feedback and we seriously consider them. Even as a student, if you have feedback, if you have questions, you can always reach out and you will most likely receive an answer. Yeah, I think we kept, sorry, we've said this for all of the questions, but community engagement again, right? If we want representation, we need to involve them. As we know, it's like we can't just sit in our offices and decide what research topics are important, what tracks we should pick for the next conference or what not. So engagement at every level is going to help us change these.
We have 3 minutes left, and I'm just like looking through the other questions, and many of them are kind of already answered, but you can reach out to us like individually, any of us mentors, or to Zhijing, and she can share the questions. There's a question about like new PhD students starting with like CSS, computational social science, or ethics in NLP, or someone interested in like logic value alignment and and alignment research and so on. So as we mentioned in the beginning, that like, go attend conferences or workshops, and also like look at like interdisciplinary opportunities for these things, and it can apply to different depending on your interests, you may want to reach out to different set of people and so on. And there are other mentorship programs and other mentorship sessions that like Zhijing organizes, and we all organizes, mostly Zhijing, the ACL mentorship program, that like we might have like follow-up sessions where we can discuss that. I think we have went through the question of like the how these research in ethics space will be used in like safety research, for instance, could be used for bad by corporations. I assume that's implicitly there. We kind of touched upon that question as well. So I'll just like wrap up with like one last question, which is kind of meta, but also because Malihe and I'm here, maybe that's like a more orthogonal question, which is on ARR, what types of papers are usually flagged for ethical issues? If flagged, what are some common ways to mitigate such concerns? Malihe, do you want to take that?
I feel like you know better this question, but I guess what I see, okay, so the things that are, again, it's sort of how it's transparency from both sides, right? As authors, we need to be transparent about what we're doing. We need to include the details and all that. But one of the major issues that Vinod and I need to deal with is when people are reviewing papers, they just flag that it needs a review. Why? So this is the thing that and because a lot of the times, we see anything that is related to a data set, and we have a recent blog post about it, anything related to health, anything related to law. Not all problems related or papers that are related to these topics have issues. are sensitive, right? So I guess I would like to, if there is a way, and while we know you're working on it, I'll try to find a link and post it in the chat. I think it would be great if you can review that, and that is a sort of more comprehensive list of what has happened and what we as a community, not just the two of us, think should go into ethics reviews.
Yeah, Mali has summarized it well. I think the ethics review process is not meant as like a policing process, but rather sort of like an helping sort of like supportive process for certain papers. Like if the authors have not articulated some of these kind of meta considerations or ethical considerations about the research that they're presenting, our intention is to sort of like help to find some reviewers who are experts in this space, have thought about these questions for years or decades, having them sort of give some feedback so that incorporate it into the paper. So many of the papers or reviews that we have dealt with are of that nature, sort of like adding more context to help authors like articulate or situate their work like a little bit more better. Rarely have we encountered kind of papers with content that are kind of deemed ethically dubious to be published even. That it rarely happens, and even then the decision is not made by just an individual research reviewer or me or Malihe. It goes through so many different levels of consideration by senior area chairs and area chairs and program chairs before such a decision is ever made. Sure, a reviewer can recommend that, but that's rarely ever followed through. In other words, like rejecting a paper purely on that ground is like rarely happens. So yeah, we are over time by 2 minutes, so I don't want I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I really enjoyed all the questions. I mean, each question could take 1 hour of like a conversation, so it was very hard, and I'm sorry that I just like pushed through. But most of these questions were like really fun to answer and important questions. So thanks a lot for like submitting them ahead of time, and thanks Zhijing for organizing this amid everything else that you're managing. The ACL community should be grateful to have you as part of like it's not just Zhijing. I know that like many others, but like Zhijing has been like my point of contact for most of the things. But it's been a fantastic sort of initiative. So thanks, Zhijing. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Great credits to Anna as well. And I really appreciate Vinod and Malihe, all your contribution to our ACL community, sharing the ethics and so on. So really nice to have this super powerful panel.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for all the questions, for being here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Great.
likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.